Welcome back to Reason and Theology. Got another fascinating one for you. Does the book of Deuteronomy teach there are other gods other than Yahweh? That's going to be the question we're exploring today. This is going to be absolutely fascinating if you're interested in the Bible, if you're interested in ancient Near Eastern culture, if you're interested in going through different manuscripts. We're going to explore all that today with a very, very deep dive of the biblical text to get to the bottom of this question. Does Deuteronomy teach there are other gods aside from Yahweh? Why is this coming up now? You know what? I actually interviewed Dr. Justin Sledge a few days ago, who first brought this to my attention. And then, oddly enough, it came back up when I was studying an unrelated matter with the Dead Sea Scrolls. So I thought, okay, I'm coming across this from multiple independent angles. I think that there's something that we need to explore here that you'll find fascinating. So that's kind of what has given rise to this. In that interview with Dr. Sledge just a few days ago, he said that, from his perspective at least, he says that it seems like there's some evidence that the god El designated some territory to the god Yahweh according to Deuteronomy 32 verses 8 through 9. And I'm like, I've never heard of this before. And that's mostly because I'm just looking at the English text, and you don't notice it until you actually look at the Hebrew text, and then you could see where some of these people are coming from. And then especially if you're looking at textual variants, how some of the manuscripts may be a little different than others, the Septuagint reading versus Dead Sea Scrolls versus others. And then you start to see some differences, and you pick up on this and you see why people have some of these theories. And so we're going to explore whether or not this theory is accurate, what there are in favor of such a thesis, and what evidence would be against such a notion that according to the book of Deuteronomy there's multiple gods. There's actually arguments that can be presented for both sides, and we're going to explore both after we've looked very, very exhaustively at different texts concerning Deuteronomy 32. So this is just going to be a really fascinating case. And I also think that it's really helpful for people to see how a deep dive of the biblical text is done. I'm going to be sharing my screen, and we're going to be going through different readings, going through different manuscripts. I'm going to actually pull up some manuscripts from the Dead Sea Scrolls, and we're going to look at the actual thing to see if we can get to the bottom of this. We're going to see why people come to different conclusions on this question. So that's where we're headed. If you enjoy this kind of material, hey, let me know by hitting that like button, hit that subscribe button, and of course, love to hear your thoughts in the comment section. Okay, so let me just share maybe a couple English translations that shows you two different readings of the same verses. Then we're going to explore why there are two different readings for the same verses. And then we're going to see the deeper implications behind it all. And I promise you, we're going to tie it all together into the question of, is Deuteronomy teaching there are multiple gods, or is there a way to read this, in a different way? Let me maybe zoom in a little bit more on that. You should be able to see it now on your screen. This is Deuteronomy 32, 8 through 9, according to the Revised Standard Version Catholic Edition, RSV, very popular English translation. And we're going to look at a few others before we dive into the original language. Okay, so it says, when the Most High, now notice that Most High, because that's going to be important when we look at the actual Hebrew. When the Most High gave to the nations their inheritance, when he separated the sons of men, he fixed the bounds of the peoples according to the number of the sons of God. Pay attention to that, because there's going to be some differences here. Of the sons of God, For the Lord, now notice this here, because that's going to be important as well. The Lord's portion is his people, Jacob, his allotted inheritance or heritage. So that's the way one translation reads. When the Most High gave the nations their inheritance, he divided them up according to the number of the sons of God, and then he gave Yahweh, or Yahweh's portion is Jacob, his allotted heritage. Let me read to you a different English translation that's based on other manuscripts that read differently. Watch what this says. Now, this is going to be the Douay-Rheims. So that is an English translation based on the Latin Vulgate tradition, which is itself based on other translations of the Bible. So it's a translation of a translation of a translation. When the Most High divided the nations, when he separated the sons of Adam, he appointed the bounds of people according to the number of the children of Israel. Now that's different. But the Lord's portion is his people, Jacob, the lot of his inheritance. Notice that the children of Israel, as opposed to another one that said the sons of God. Why is that? Because different manuscripts say different things, and I'm going to explain why. And we'll see how that connects into the overall purpose of the video. So hang with me. Now, in fact, if you look at a lot of English translations, they're going to give you the reading children of God, or I'm sorry, children of Israel, children of Israel. A few will give you children of God or sons of God. Probably the majority will say children of Israel. So they'll be in line with what the Douay-Rheims from the Vulgate tradition is saying. Why is that? Because again, different manuscripts that these translations are based off of have different readings. And the question is, why? Why would there be different readings here? Let's first of all take a look at Biblia Hebraica, Stuttgartensia. So this is a critical edition of the Hebrew Old Testament. Got a copy right here, paper format, hardbound. We're going to take a look at that, but I'm going to show you the electronic version here on the screen. We're also going to take a look at the Septuagint. I'll show you the electronic version. Some just really, really fascinating stuff going on here. So looking at the text here in Hebrew, if we look at 32 verse 8 of Deuteronomy, does it say sons of God or children of God, or does it say sons of Israel? There's an important difference. We'll see why. Here it says B'nai Yisrael. So that would be children of Israel. Now, why would this critical edition of the Hebrew text say that when we're seeing some other manuscripts that say otherwise? In fact, what are those manuscripts that say children of God or sons of God instead of sons of Israel? If you look here at the apparatus of this critical edition, you just put your mouse over it in any kind of software that will show you the critical apparatus of the Biblia Hebraica that shows you differing manuscripts that have differing readings. If you look at it, I'll open it up over here. Here we go. One reading here in Greek says angelon theou, which would be angels of God or messengers of God. You can see how somebody would get like sons of God out of that. Angels of God or messengers of God. So some readings don't say sons of Israel. Some manuscripts say angels of God. You can also see here Symmachus has a different reading. Who is Symmachus? Well, let me actually pull that up and show you here. Symmachus was a writer who translated the Hebrew Bible into Greek, and his translation was included by Origen, the early church ecclesiastical writer, condemned later on, the Fifth Ecumenical Council and other ecumenical councils. Origen in his Hexapla. This was a critical edition of the Old Testament, Hexapla. It's fascinating. Origen was kind of like your first guy to create a critical edition of the Old Testament. 6 versions, 4 of them translated into Greek, preserved now only in fragments. But Symmachus was part of his critical edition. And this is a guy, late 2nd century, who translated the Hebrew Bible into Greek. There were several of these people. And Origen relied on, multiple groups, multiple people who translated the Hebrew text into Greek. So going back to where we were at, Symmachus's version, as well as, look at this, Syro-Hexaplaris. There's a word for you. It says there in Latin. This is from the Syriac Greek text from the recension of Origen, is what it says there in Latin. What exactly is that? Okay, well, let's go to that real quick. The Syro-Hexaplar version is the Syrian Aramaic translation of the Greek of the Septuagint. So it's a translation of a translation. It's the Syrian Aramaic translation of a Greek, which is itself a translation of the Hebrew. And it's also found in Origen's Hexapla. Okay, now what do those different versions of this part of Deuteronomy say? What is Symmachus's version? And what does this Syro-Hexaplaris say? Well, notice here it says probabiliter, which means probably in Latin, probably recte. So the more probable or more likely or more right reading is what it's saying here in Latin is, drum roll, Benai El, children of El. Some will translate that as children of God, but El, yes, can be translated as God, but El is also a specific name for a deity revered in the ancient Near Eastern culture. So the children of El. In other words, what they're saying is that this should read according to the number of the children of El. When the Most High divided up the nations, he fixed the bounds of the people according to the children of El. And Yahweh's portion is Israel. So if you also look here at the critical apparatus, it says vel, which means or in Latin. So one probable reading is the children of El. Another probable reading is Benai Elohim, the children of Elohim. Elohim could be God, but Elohim is also plural. Plural. This is why some people say Elohim is gods, multiple gods, or Benai Elohim could refer to angels. The Benai Elohim seemingly in some parts of the Hebrew Old Testament refers to angels, the sons of God, but notice it's in the plural. But these are the more likely readings. Now, why am I stressing that these are the more likely readings than saying the sons of Israel? Well, here's why. If you're a scribe and you come across a text that's theologically difficult, that seems to assert something that doesn't really match up with your theology as the scribe, or you could imagine some scribes would be tempted to, when they're copying their translation or copying their text, they would be tempted to alter the text, to correct in their mind the text. Because they would think, oh, surely this is wrong. Let me correct that. Let me give you an example. There are some passages in the New Testament, for example, where Jesus says, no one knows the day or the hour of the coming of his coming, Jesus' second coming. Not even the angels, not even the Son of Man, who's supposed to be contextually here, Jesus himself. So Jesus seems to be saying he doesn't even know what the day or hour of his coming is. Now you can see theologically that's going to create some difficulties if Jesus is fully God and fully man. He would be omniscient. That creates some theological difficulties. And various church fathers came up with different solutions, some better, some worse. The point is, however, when the scribes would come across that, some would just copy it as it is. Others would alter the text, and they would say, oh, this can't be right when it says not even the Son of Man. Even the Son of Man doesn't know the day or the hour. That can't be right. That goes against the doctrine of the Trinity or the divinity of Jesus. So they say, some of the scribes said, okay, that can't be right. I'm going to take that out of the text in my copy. And I'm just going to have it say, not even the angels. This other part where it says not even the Son and professes Jesus's ignorance, I'm going to take that out because that just can't be true. So you'll find some manuscripts that don't have not even the Son in there. And you'll find other manuscripts that do have it in there. Now, how do you know which one is authentic? The one that's more likely to be authentic is going to be the more difficult text, the more difficult reading. And that's what we were reading there in Latin from the critical apparatus there of the Biblia Hebraica. The more likely reading is going to be the more difficult one. Why? Because if you're a scribe, you're not usually going to add something to the text that makes it more difficult for your theology to harmonize with your theology. That doesn't make sense. You would likely, however, take something out that is at tension with your theology, assuming it is something that was added later on in a mistake. So we know the authentic reading would be the one that says Jesus is saying even he doesn't know the hour of his own coming. That's what's going on here as well. Something similar is going on here as well, and I'm going to show you how we know that in a moment. But they're saying the more difficult, but however likely reading is children of El or children of Elohim, not the children of Israel. Why would a scribe want to change that, though? First of all, let me demonstrate that they did change. If you look here, this is the Dead Sea Scrolls, and this shows you what we do have preserved from the Dead Sea Scrolls for Deuteronomy 32, 8 through 9. And notice there's a little snippet of this part of the text that does show up, and it says, Benai Elohim, sons of God, or children of God. And you know what? Don't take this software's word for it. I actually went and tracked down the Dead Sea Scroll fragment that is in question. I think it is 4Q Deuteronomy J. 4Q Deuteronomy J is the name of this little tiny fragment here. Okay, let's zoom in on it. I chased that thing down. We found that fragment that they're basing that on. So you don't have to take anybody's word for it. Scroll in, zoom in there. Look at what it says very clearly. Benai Elohim. Somewhat peculiar handwriting there by the scribe, but if you know just basics of Hebrew, you would see Benai Elohim right here. Very clear, plain as day. Okay? So here you're actually looking at the Dead Sea Scrolls. This isn't some translation. You're putting your eyes on what's something that is maybe something that's 2,300 or so years old, written by a scribe before Jesus. Some of the earliest texts that we have, in fact, one of the earliest texts we have of Deuteronomy in existence today. You're looking at it right now on your screen. Okay. So what does that tell us? That tells us that the earliest attestation that we seemingly have in Hebrew is to a reading of Benai Elohim. Why would a translator, or scribe, I should say, change that to children of Israel? Well, it's very much related to our topic here of, does Deuteronomy teach there are other gods? I'll connect the dots for you. Let me show you. Oh, but before we do that, one other thing, just for good measure, here's the Septuagint. Let's see here in Greek for Deuteronomy 32:8, angelon theou, angel of God, or messenger of God, or messengers, I should say, plural, of God. Okay? So we're seeing different readings. Messengers of God, children of God, children of El, children of Israel. Why would somebody change it, however, from children of God to Israel? And that doesn't even make a whole lot of sense, just contextually, if you read it that way, the way the Douay-Rheims reads it and the way most English translations read, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense. According to the children of Israel, he bound the peoples of the earth and divided them up according to the number of the children of Israel, 12, maybe. That doesn't make a whole lot of sense. Here's why a scribe changed it, and how we know that a scribe changed it, and how we know children of Israel is not the authentic or preferred reading. Because when you come here to Deuteronomy 32:8-9, it says, when the Most High gave the nations their inheritance. What's Most High? In the Hebrew, Most High here is going to be Elyon. You can hear El in there, Elyon. It means Most High. You see versions of that, like El Elyon. You'll find that in the Hebrew Bible. Who is El? Who is El? El could just mean God, like a generic name for deity, God. It's also a specific person. It's a specific God as well. El Elyon, this is a deity in the ancient Near Eastern world that even the pagan nations worshipped prior to the Bible, prior to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, prior to Moses. The pagans were worshiping a deity known as El Elyon. So you can read this kind of in two ways. It says when the Most High, or when El Elyon gave the nations their inheritance. Is this like a generic El, or is this more of a specific person? Well, watch what happens. When El, or Elyon, gave to the nations their inheritance, when he separated the sons of men, he fixed the bounds of the people according to the number of the sons of God, or the sons of El, as we saw there, according to the preferred reading. The sons of El, or the Dead Sea Scrolls, the sons of Elohim. But again, El and Elohim are specific deities, and they're also generic names, generic words for God. It could be read either way. It could be read as a specific God, or it could be read as just a general reference for the supreme being. And then it says, for the Lord's portion is his people, Jacob, his allotted inheritance. What's Lord here in all capital Lord? Yahweh. Yahweh. Who is Yahweh? Yahweh is obviously in the biblical text the God of the Bible, but also Yahweh was a deity that pagans worshipped in the ancient Near Eastern lands. We covered that in a previous episode. Yahweh was a pagan deity and also the deity of the Bible. It's a term, it's a reference for either. So here's how some people read this text. Some people read this to say, when Elyon, they'll say the pagan god Elyon, gave the nations their inheritance, when he separated the sons of men, he fixed the bounds of the people according to the number of the sons of the pagan god El. And then he gave to Yahweh specifically this particular portion of the land. Here's how some people are reading this. They're reading this as El is one God, and he's giving to Yahweh some territory, and then he's given to some of these other gods other territory. You see how some people would read this? So they would read this as saying there's multiple gods. There's this El God. There's other children of El who are also gods. And Yahweh is one of them. And Yahweh is given this territory of Israel, but all this other territory in the world is given to these other children of the God El. So when they read this, they're reading this as different gods, multiple gods, being attested here in Deuteronomy 32. And this is part of the great Song of Moses. One of the oldest parts of the Hebrew Bible is Deuteronomy 31 through 32, Song of Moses. This is one of the most ancient parts of the Bible right here. And so they're going to read this and say, you see, even the most ancient aspects of Israelite theology was that there were many gods, and that Yahweh was the God of Israel, but there are other gods according to different territories and different lands. It's called henotheism. The idea that there's different gods for different territories, but in your territory, you worship the God of your territory. And they'll say the Israelites were henotheists, and they'll read this according to that. And you could see why they would do that. Guess what? The scribe who was working through this text saw the problem with sons of God here. He saw the problem. He saw that, yeah, this can lend itself to the idea that there's sons of El, and that El is dividing up the nations according to these different gods. So the scribe sees that. What does he do? He alters the text to say sons of Israel. But we know that's an alteration. And we also know that's an attempt on part of a scribe to try to harmonize something that's going against, in his mind, his theology. So the more difficult text would be sons of God or sons of El or Elohim, which we see attested to in the Dead Sea Scrolls. Now, is this the only way to read the text? How would a monotheist read the text? Well, let me give you a different way to read it. When the Most High, when Elyon gave the nations their inheritance, when he separated the sons of men, he fixed the bounds of the people according to the number of the sons of God, for Yahweh's portion is his people, Jacob his allotted heritage. What some are going to read when they say read this, they're going to say, Elyon here is just another reference to the one true God. And yeah, sure, pagans used that name as well for their gods, but the one true God of the Bible also uses some of those references to identify himself. So you could read it as when the Most High, the one true God, gave the nations their inheritance. When he separated the sons of men, he fixed the bounds of the peoples according to the numbers of. And here you wouldn't necessarily read it as the sons of El. You would read it as just the sons of God generically. And you would say that is in reference either to the angels or something else, but most likely the angels. According to the number of angels, that's how he divided up the nations. And this lends into what Michael Heiser calls the divine council. Not going to go into that today, but this is how some would read it. And then they'll read here, for Yahweh's portion is his people, Jacob is allotted heritage. They'll say, well, Yahweh and Elyon are the same thing. It's just different ways to refer to the one same God. But how do you deal with the difficulty that it looks like God is dividing up a portion for himself? One can just read it as to say, God reserved this portion of the land for himself. And then he allotted these other portions to the angels, according to the sons of God. And maybe then you can import the idea that, According to Daniel and other parts, it looks like different angels are assigned different territories and are over different territories. You can insert that in here. So what does that mean? It means there's a way in which you can read this as a strict monotheist, as one who doesn't believe that there are other gods. There is a way to read it. There's a way to make sense of it. There's a way to harmonize it. There's also a way to read this that's completely incompatible with monotheism and that asserts there are other gods and promotes a henotheistic view. There's a way to read it just like that as well. So what does that tell you? That tells you that the conclusion is based on ultimately assumptions and hermeneutics, your methodology of interpretation. Number one, methodology of interpretation. Are you looking for discontinuity? Are you looking for contradictions? If so, you'll likely go with a more henotheistic interpretation. Or are you looking for harmonizations and continuity? If so, you'll likely go for a strict monotheistic understanding here, and you'll harmonize it in the way that I demonstrated could be done. So hermeneutics, methodology, but also assumptions. If you assume that Yahweh was a pagan god that pre-existed, the Israelites worshiping Yahweh. So in other words, if Yahweh was something that originated from paganism rather than originated from divine revelation, and if you assume that El is something that originated in paganism rather than something that's in divine revelation, you might be more inclined to read this as some kind of throwback, some kind of remnant, some kind of historical memory of the Israelites being aware that, they're in this context of different gods, El and Yahweh and all these other deities. And they're trying to adopt what their neighbors and what the pagan nations are saying. You'll likely read it in that way. So a lot of this is going to be based on assumptions. Now, if you assume, oh no, I don't believe that Yahweh or El was something that predated divine revelation, you're not going to read it that way. Or if you believe, well, maybe what happened is in the beginning, God revealed his name to everyone as Yahweh and El. He revealed himself as this, but a lot of people forgot the truth and they corrupted it. And some of these pagan nations retained the name Yahweh, but they then began to see it as like a pagan deity instead of the one true God. So they kept the name, but then they corrupted the meaning. Some might go for that kind of an argument. The fascinating thing here is you're looking at the same data, and yet you can come to two different conclusions. And how many times have we seen that on this show? Whether we're dealing with the magisterium or we're dealing with the Bible, we're dealing with archaeology, it's fascinating how you can look at the same data and come to two very different conclusions. What does that tell you? At the very least, it tells you that the data itself is vague enough as to be interpreted either way. And that's what's going on here with Deuteronomy 32. 8 through 9. It is vague enough to where you could read it either way. But some scribes noticed the difficulty, noticed the tension, and attempted to change the text, change the word here, to get rid of the difficulty. And the difficulty only becomes apparent when you're aware of the original language and you're looking at the manuscripts. If you were just reading this in English, it's not even going to register. You could read through it 1,000 times and never pick up on what's going on here with the difficulty. I find that fascinating. That tells us that we need to be looking at the original languages. We need to be aware of scribal alterations. We need to be aware of what different manuscripts say, because once you do that, then you become aware of a lot more of these challenges. And I promise you this. If you're not looking into it, your skeptic friend is, and your skeptic friend's going to bring it to your attention. So at least you would want to look into this already and maybe be anticipating an answer, because it's going to be brought to your attention one way or another. If you find this fascinating, if you found this interesting, if you enjoyed this and you want to see more videos like it, please let me know your feedback there in the comment section. And of course, hit that like button, hit the subscribe button. It takes a little bit of time to pull this stuff up and do a little bit of investigation into all that. And so if you appreciate the work that I've done here, hey, consider supporting me at Patreon, patreon.com/reasoning theology, or hit the join button right here on YouTube to become a channel member. You'll get access to plenty of extra patron-only content, and you'll support my show. Of course, you can also send a super sticker for thanks and all that good stuff. All right, we'll see you later.